In Miami, Zoya finds herself in the hospital as doctors have discovered a black hole expanding within her chest. With no remedy available, she has merely 1 week left to live. The doctors inform Zoya's husband, Donald, her daughter Jane, and her son-in-law that they should take Zoya home to spend her final days surrounded by family. During the journey, the family attempts to keep Zoya engaged with conversation and music, but she is absorbed in her own reflections. They continue to try to make her comfortable, but she is not helpless and mostly feels irritated. The following day, they visit the publishers overseeing all of the couple's science books, who naively believe Zoya will recover and wish to discuss the concluding chapter of her latest book, which remains unfinished. Next, they meet with the family lawyer to sort out the will and any pertinent paperwork for the future. The family also takes Zoya to the beach and a massage parlor to help her unwind, but it offers little relief. Eventually, Zoya drops by to see her mother Sandra at the retirement home, yet Sandra remains silent, merely glued to the television. Frustrated by this, Zoya steps outside to enjoy some fruit on a bench. At that moment, another resident approaches her, and Zoya alerts her to impending bird droppings just before they land. When the lady inquires how she knew, Zoya explains that she has been reliving the last week repeatedly, thanks to some caplets she found in her childhood. Each time she wakes in the hospital, her family puts her through the same routines, and she has spoken with this lady before. On the final day of the week, her family surprises her with a birthday cake, and she must feign surprise. Just then, her nose begins to bleed, prompting her to hide in the bathroom to take the caplet and reset time, causing her to vanish instantly. The next time she sees the old lady, she saves her from the bird droppings but keeps her method a secret. While with her mother, they watch news coverage of the last one-horned rhino on Earth arriving in Miami, and Zoya tells her the rhino will meet its end by the week's close. Yet, her mother shows no response, frustrating Zoya to the point where she neglects to warn the old lady about the bird droppings. Growing weary of the same conversation, Zoya walks away and accidentally collides with Paula, causing her to drop her belongings. Zoya is taken aback to discover Paula has been reading one of her old books and wonders how she acquired it. Paula reveals that the retirement home has a library. Many of these books were donated by residents, and Zoya finds numerous volumes that once belonged to her during her youth, all dropped by Sandra. Paula shares that she chose Zoya's book as she is working under a professor at a university lab, studying time. Before Zoya can elaborate, Donald appears to take her home, and Zoya brings the book with her. Later that evening, Zoya contemplates whether she might have a chance at survival if she revisits her past research, weeping as she bemoans the monotony. Donald believes spending her last days in a lab is a misdirection and leads her to the living room for her surprise birthday cake. When her nose starts bleeding again, Zoya steps outside and contacts Paula using the number from the book. She tells her she'll find her soon for something significant and then takes the caplet to reset the week. When Zoya awakens in the hospital, she instructs Jane and Donald to sign the paperwork while she prepares to go home. However, as soon as they leave, Zoya carefully slips out of the room unnoticed, as they are engrossed in the game. She escapes via the fire exit and hails a cab, promising the driver she'll pay upon reaching home. Moments later, Zoya retrieves the hidden keys outside and enters her house, where she packs her caplets, books, and some clothes into a suitcase. After changing into clean clothes, she comes out ready to pay, only to discover the cab has already left. Next, she seeks out Paula, who does not recognize her due to the reset. Zoya explains everything, but Paula is skeptical, concealing her hand and asking how many fingers she's holding up to validate the tale. Naturally, Zoya fails the test, prompting her to reset the week once more, and this time she manages to pay the taxi driver. When Paula tests her knowledge again, Zoya has an uncanny ability to predict various aspects of the conversation, including hand signals, the cat's vocalizations, and Paula's forthcoming inquiries, indicating her familiarity with the dialogue. Eventually convinced of her intentions, Paula consents to assist her, and they head to the university where Zoya elaborates on her efforts to comprehend the function of the caplets 3 decades ago, but life intervened, forcing her to abandon her research. She is only permitted to ingest a single caplet at a time, as taking another immediately yields no effect. The previous one must first dissipate from her system. Her objective with this experiment is to reclaim her life, allowing her more time to attain the greatness she once aspired to. The laboratory and its tools are somewhat antiquated, yet they will suffice for the time being. Zoya conveys her insights. The caplets neither combust nor dissolve. It's almost as if they never truly existed, perpetually reviving as if suspended in a state of uncertainty. Paula desires to examine the regeneration itself in order to deconstruct the phenomenon, though Zoya emphasizes that this process occurs at a subatomic scale. Instead, she proposes they attempt to replicate it, akin to her initial efforts in her youth. A debate unfolds concerning the next steps to take, prompting Paula to formulate a plan, leading her to step out of the lab for assistance. At that moment, Zoya receives a call from Donald, which she chooses to ignore. Overcome with remorse, she attempts to depart, only to be stunned to encounter Dulsberg, her former university mentor. He expresses delight at seeing her and invites her into his office, where he is taken aback to discover Paula rummaging through his desk. As he panics, Paula informs him that she's collaborating with Zoya and that she's merely a kind of student here, leaving Zoya perplexed. Dulsberg becomes even more incensed, attributing the situation to Zoya, who he recalls had impressed him with her test scores, believing she would become extraordinary, only to find her an indolent and privileged student. The pair is promptly expelled from the office, and Paula attempts to dissuade Zoya from taking Dulsberg's remarks to heart. However, Zoya admits that he was accurate. She was indeed lazy, managing to pass the exams by resetting time. Subsequently, Paula reveals the box she pilfered from the professor's office. It contains a nanoscopic man. An experiment was sufficiently successful to miniaturize an individual, but they couldn't halt the process, so he continues shrinking to this day. To interact with him, the duo enters a cold, dry aging chamber since ambient temperature might introduce bacteria and mold into the box. A century for this man equates to just a few seconds in the regular world. Paula powers up the box since the man possesses a transmitter in his suit, allowing him to send and receive messages on a tiny screen. His suit also carries a particle detector, so they insert a caplet into the box for him to scrutinize. After a few seconds of agitation from the caplet, a host of bizarre code appears both on the little display and the connected computer. Paula examines it and confirms Zoya's assertion. The caplet is in a constant state of flux, cycling through various structures. At day's end, Zoya stays over at Paula's place and shares how she stumbled upon the bottle of caplets at the age of 12 while strolling on a golf course. It lay there unattended, and she took it because it bore her name. Though there was no one around, she distinctly heard a voice whisper, "You'll change the world." In the ensuing days, the duo persistently experiments with various methods to comprehend the caplets, yet their efforts yield limited results, particularly as the outdated equipment keeps failing. Zoya frequently resets the week, repeatedly escaping the hospital to recruit Paula and start anew. After several resets, Zoya manages to return home to her family. When Jane expresses anxiety about her situation of teaching music to children instead of pursuing her dream of being a composer, Zoya insists she should engage with her music during her free time until her breakthrough comes. This reflects Zoya's own childhood, as young Zoya had vowed to her father that she would follow in his footsteps as a scientist. The resets continue, as does the research. The duo remains at a standstill, and Zoya becomes increasingly apprehensive that despite having all the time available, she may still fail. One morning, before Zoya arrives to enlist Paula's help, her true circumstances come to light. The professor she was meant to work under unexpectedly took a sabbatical, leaving her with little time to choose another for the year. Countless resets later, Zoya and Paula anticipate a minor explosion in the lab while contemplating alternative avenues. Paula finds it peculiar that Zoya never received any assistance for her research in the past, leading Zoya to confess that after graduation, she didn't enroll in a science program in Europe like her classmates. Donald had advised her to ensure it would make her happy, which prompted Zoya to realize she didn't genuinely enjoy experimentation. She merely wanted to decode the caplets. Then Paula inquires about her previous research, and Zoya recalls it was left with her mom's belongings. Just then, Zoya's nose begins to bleed, prompting her to take the caplet to reset the week. She undergoes the familiar routine of recruiting Paula, and they venture to the retirement home in search of her mom's old boxes. Sandra preserved her own psychology documents and a newspaper piece about NASA research by Zoya's ex, Mark, but she didn't safeguard any of her daughter's creations. While contemplating her next steps, a nurse informs Zoya that Donald is nearby, desperately seeking her in tears. However, when Zoya attempts to pursue him, he has already vanished. On her return journey, Zoya reflects on the moment she told Donald she wouldn't be joining the Europe program. He had genuinely wanted her to participate since it was a fantastic opportunity, but only suggested she do what truly makes her happy after she expressed her refusal to reconsider. A few resets later, the absence of emotional support is weighing heavily on Zoya. She yearns for her family, and it becomes increasingly difficult to leave them behind repeatedly. Meanwhile, her family continues preparing a surprise cake, yet she never arrives, and Zoya wonders if they're merely standing there through the resets, waiting for her. After countless more resets, Zoya realizes she's entrapped in yet another monotonous cycle and declares that they've ultimately tried everything, so continuing is pointless. Paula urges her not to give up and suggests Zoya reach out to Mark for assistance, but Zoya simply wishes to be with her family. Now, it's Paula's moment to express her frustration, pointing out that she's jeopardized her job and stolen the little man merely for someone who appeared at her apartment one morning. After disclosing she too desires to go back in time to mend her life, Paula bolts out of the room. Zoya chases after her, and Paula hands back the caplets. She refrained from taking one because she feared she would also acquire the black hole within her body. Paula longs to revisit a moment from when she was 15, having taken her parents' car without permission and driven over a nail. She replaced the car without uttering a word, believing her parents would discover the nail and remove it, yet they overlooked it, resulting in a tire blowout that killed them. Wanting to assist Paula, Zoya declares she'll find Mark. That evening, Zoya reveals that she discovered the caplets a week after her father passed, attempting to go back to save him, but she consistently woke up the day following his death. When Zoya mentions her perceived failure to be exceptional like her father wished, Paula highlights that she authored numerous books, which is quite an achievement. Their moment gets interrupted when Zoya's nose bleeds again, and she resets the week, vanishing from Paula's room. Upon waking, Zoya collects her belongings and opts to see Dulsberg instead. She passionately expresses her thoughts on how he perceives her, admitting she can indeed be lazy or impatient, but at least she's making an effort, and right now she requires Mark for the next phase. Impressed, Dulsberg hands her Mark's address. Subsequently, Zoya heads to the airport, and while waiting for her flight, she reminisces about the last time she encountered Mark. Both of them showed up at the class reunion, and their dialogue was incredibly uncomfortable due to their vastly different backgrounds. In fact, Zoya viewed Mark's remarks as belittling. When Zoya finally arrives at Mark's residence, it's his son Chris who greets her at the door with devastating news. Mark has passed away. He dedicated all his time to work, neglecting his health by not eating or sleeping, which ultimately devastated him. Zoya is led to Mark's office, and amidst his piles of research and accolades, she is astounded to discover her own old notebooks. Chris confesses he despises that room because Mark frequently claimed that his achievements would make his son proud, while Chris simply yearned for a father. Zoya then offers him a comforting embrace. Shortly thereafter, Zoya sorts through her old research and realizes she often wrote Donald's name on the pages. She reminisces about their past relationships and comes to a revelation about what truly matters to her, prompting her to finally listen to all the voicemails. Each message from Joyce and Donald grows increasingly frantic as they search for her. In the final messages, they're crying and pleading for her return, expressing a desire to see her one last time before it's too late. Zoya experiences a breakdown, her nose bleeding, and upon glancing down, she notices a dark void expanding within her chest. In a frantic state, she seeks out her caplets to rewind time just once more. Upon waking, Zoya rushes out of her room to embrace her daughter and offer an apology. On the trip home, she acts more amiably, eagerly engaging in the conversation. That evening, she becomes intimate with Donald and questions him about whether they've lived a fulfilling life. He replies affirmatively without a hint of doubt. Over the following days, Zoya feels significantly more vibrant, actively participating in family activities. She signs her will, adding a note to bequeath all her books to the retirement home, takes Donald to a massage parlor to hold hands during the session, and enjoys an exhilarating day at the beach with her family. During her visit with Sandra, she takes her to see the dying rhino. On the final day, Zoya goes to Paula to give her the caplets and her research. She realizes that true greatness lies in knowing when to pass on her work to future generations instead of chasing after fleeting fame. Later, Paula discovers a small note in the notebook instructing her on whom to contact at Princeton for assistance. That evening, Zoya joyfully celebrates with her family over birthday cake. This time, there's no bleeding from her nose, and she remains in the room, prompting Jane to bring her a gift. It's an ultrasound image revealing that Jane is expecting, and she announces that they'll name the baby Zoya. As tears of joy fill her eyes, Zoya embraces her daughter but recoils when she feels her nose starting to bleed. She apologizes for her past absences and gives Donald a kiss before expressing her love for everyone. Suddenly, the scene freezes except for the clock ticking away. Zoya vanishes in an eerie blur signifying her death and reappears in the past, sharing with her younger self the words she recalls hearing when she picked up the bottle. Thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe.